Here we go.
Okay. All right. I'd like to call to order the November 19th special meeting for the election of officers of the New Canaan Board of Education. And I'd like to turn it over to our first selectman for the election of officers.
Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be with you this evening for my duty to conduct your election. I will first take nominations for the position of board chair. Do I hear nominations for board chair? Deanna?
I'd like to nominate.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have to share them.
Sorry. I'd like to nominate Brendan Hayes for chair of the Board of Education. Brendan was elected to the Board of Ed in 2015 and has held the role as chair of the Education Resources Committee since his election to the Board of Education. Brendan is a finance leader, and as a board member, Brendan was instrumental in the updating of the Board of Education's facilities rental policies, as well as being a consistent advocate throughout the board's budget process. Brendan and his wife Lainey have 3 sons, ages 14, 11, and 8, and have lived in New Canaan for 10 years. In addition to the responsibilities of his day job, as a senior managing director in investment banking at Guggenheim Securities, Brendan serves on the Dean's Advisory Council for Newcomb Tulane College at Tulane University, a mouthful, and has been a youth sports coach in New Canaan. Brendan graduated from Tulane University with a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics and History and received his MBA from NYU Stern School of Business. Brendan has been a thoughtful leader on the Board of Education, and I enthusiastically endorse his nomination for chair.
Okay, do I have a second for Brendan?
I second the nomination.
Are there any other nominations for board chair? Hearing none, all in favor of electing Brendan as board chair? You vote by raise of hand, okay?
You have to raise your hand.
Who's your secretary?
Jen.
Okay.
But we have a secretary.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
I'm here.
Any, I see that's not unanimous perhaps, but that vote carries? Do you record your votes, both negative and?
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
Okay, so are there any votes against Mr. Hayes' nomination? Okay, and that completes the vote. Thank you. Congratulations, Brendan.
Thank you.
Do I have nominations for the role of vice chair?
Here. Yes. Having ably led this board for the last 3 years, Deanna Carlson needs no introduction. She's shown that she is fair-minded, passionate about education, fiscally prudent, effective, and forward-looking. She advocates tirelessly for the students of the district, stands up for the Board of Ed and students' interests when appropriate, tackles hard issues, and when there are disagreements, does not take them personally. Rather, she digs in, learns the facts, helps the board make its best judgment, and moves forward with a positive attitude. New Canaan schools and students have benefited greatly from Deanna's leadership. As vice chair, Deanna will provide a useful continuity in our leadership team. I've enjoyed working with Deanna this year as vice chair, and it's my pleasure to nominate her as vice chair for next year.
Do we have a second for Deanna Carlson?
I second.
Any further nominations? Hearing none, all those in favor of electing Deanna Carlson board chair, vice chair, say aye, or raise your hands. That. Any no votes? Okay. Deanna, congratulations. I will now take nominations for board secretary.
I am honored to nominate Jen Richardson for the role of Secretary of the Board of Education. Jen is currently in her 2nd term on the Board of Ed, and she's served for the past 2 years as secretary. She is the parent of 4 children enrolled in New Canaan Public Schools, actually one who's successfully off to college. And I think we would vote her as the MVP volunteer for New Canaan Public Schools. Prior to joining the board, she served as the SACS PTC president. She's also currently still heavily involved with the high school PFA, including chairing the scholarship color run and also the post-prom this year. We are a better board because of Jen's thoughtful nature, her discipline, and her diligence, and I'm happy and honored to nominate her for secretary.
Do I have a second for Jen?
I second.
Okay. Do I have any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor of Jen Richardson as Secretary of the Board? Any no votes? Okay, congratulations, Jen. All right. That being the election of your officers, I will turn the meeting over to your new chairman, Brendan, and I will depart,
Okay.
only to stay for your public hearing. Thank you.
Can I have a motion to adjourn? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Penny? Second? Sherry? All those in favor?
Good luck.
Thanks. Adjourned.
So since
All right.
we adjourned the other meeting, so this one will be called to order once again.
I'd like to call the special public hearing to order. Thank you.
Great.
Just to review the ground rules for this evening, we are focused on school start time, so if you could address just school start times, that would be great. Anyone who wishes to speak should have already signed up. If you haven't, there should be a sheet over by the table there.
Did you keep it? No, come back.
It's still going to be over there. We're going to call you in the order in which you signed up. I have a sheet in front of me for that. If you could state your name and address in town, that would be great. And then each person will have 3 minutes in total. Ms. Richardson will raise her hand when you have 2 minutes, when you have 1 minute left. And in total, we've allotted 45 minutes. To the extent that we need to add time to that, we'll discuss it as a board. With that, why don't we get started? Alicia Meyer.
Hi, good evening. Alicia Meyer, 649 Ponus Ridge. I'm a member of our town's Health and Human Services Commission. I'm here tonight as a commission member and as a public health advocate. School start times are a public health issue. In October, I attended the Adolescent Health and School Start Times Science and Strategies Conference at Trinity College in Hartford. I was very happy to see both Dr. Letzi and Deanna Carlson there. This conference was an opportunity for adolescent sleep experts, school superintendents, school board members, parents, and other interested parties to hear the hard science on adolescent sleep patterns, to see the data collected by school districts that have changed to later start times, and to compare notes on best practices for facing the challenges to changing start times. The science supporting a school start time of 8:30 or later for adolescents is compelling. At that day, we heard from Dr. Judith Owens, who is an internationally recognized expert on pediatric sleep. She holds a lot of titles, including Professor of Neurology at Harvard. She also wrote the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation on school start times. Her research shows that starting school at 8:30 or later will align school schedules to the biological sleep rhythms of adolescents, whose circadian rhythms, their sleep-wake cycles, begin to shift up to 2 hours later at the start of puberty. So what does this change in the sleep-wake cycle mean? It means that even those adolescents with perfect sleep hygiene habits, meaning those kids whose phones are put away, whose homework is done, whose screen time is over, who are showered and in bed at an early hour, are biologically programmed to fall asleep later at around 11 p.m. It means that they can't just try to go to sleep earlier so they can wake up earlier. Adolescents need about 9 hours of sleep. They're biologically programmed to go to sleep at 11 and wake up around 8, which is after the school day has already started. Further, the last few hours of sleep are REM sleep, which is the best quality of sleep that students need. When school start times change and kids get better sleep, the science shows that they have reduced rates of depression, obesity, and suicidal ideation. They have fewer car accidents. They have better grades, better test scores, fewer athletic injuries, and an overall better quality of life. I'd like to pause on this moment of science. As a commission member for Health and Human Services, we spend a lot of time, effort, and money working on issues like depression and suicide. And this seems like the most important change we could make on those issues. Wilton has already made these changes and have seen positive differences, including in tardyism and absenteeism. I know that there are a lot of logistics and budget issues to work out, and it can feel daunting, but as a public health measure, I think it would be difficult to find another issue currently facing our town government
that's 3
with as
minutes.
much import. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bear Crystal.
Hi, good evening. My name is Bear Crystal, and I live on 82 Kimberly Place.
I'm a junior right now at St. Luke's School, which is in Wilton, and I have 3 siblings, all younger, a sister and 2 younger brothers. 2 of my siblings, my second brother Luke, who's in 7th grade at Sax Middle School, and my sister Daisy, who's currently in New Canaan High School, all have a pretty early wake up. Right now, they're all waking up probably at 6 to 5:45, depending on how much time they need to wake up. And although I wake up a lot later, they have a pretty similar schedule to me when they get home. It's usually filled with sports, so I'm getting home right now at about 6 to 6:30 every night. My sister is about the same. And then we obviously have homework and dinner, so by the time I usually get to sleep every night is about at 11 o'clock. Since I go to St. Luke's, my normal wake up is around 7:30 to 8, depending on the day, because on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I have an 8:30 start time at St. Luke's, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have a 9 o'clock start. So obviously, I'm allowed to get a little more sleep, and this allows me to be a lot more alert and awake during the day and after school when I'm doing homework and other activities. My sister and my brother, on the other hand, aren't exactly the same case. Usually in the morning when I wake up, I end up actually waking up to my sister's alarm because she won't even notice it no matter what setting or volume she puts it at, because she's simply too tired to get up. And then when she gets home, she usually goes right to bed and takes a nap, just trying to catch up on sleep. Although my brother hasn't really shown too much lack of sleep, he's showing some early effects, because when he gets home from school, we usually throw the football around a little bit just because he loves football so much. But I've never seen a kid yawn so much during the day, especially before school. It's amazing. I've never seen it happen. And my littlest brother, even though he's about to hit 7th grade, which is when the start times are pushed back, he hasn't shown any effects at all, but that's because the start time is pushed later. So yeah, I think there's obviously a need for change here, and I'm really looking forward to see what you guys do with this. So thank you.
Thank you. Jill Crystal.
Good evening. My name's Jill Crystal, 82 Kimberly Place, mother of Bear Crystal. So Bear is 17. He's at St. Luke's School in the 11th grade. Daisy, my daughter, is 15 at the high school in 10th grade. Luke is 13 at Sax in 7th grade, and Harry is 10 at Sax in 5th grade. I'm also a yoga instructor here in town. And through my job in yoga, I'm constantly talking about the importance of mental health. And I think we can all agree here that there are concerns regarding mental health. They are all on the rise. Anxiety and depression are especially on the rise with our teens. Taking care of our teens' mental health starts with sleep. Teens have emotional and mood problems when they don't sleep enough. Their overall well-being is at risk. I know this firsthand because I see the difference sleep makes in my house. Daisy, my 10th grader, gets up at 6 a.m. or tries to, as Bear said, and she's been doing that since 7th grade. She's a high honors student who stays up late studying. We have found her asleep at her desk on her computer, her head on the keyboard. We have found her lying in her bed trying to do some reading, sound asleep at an early hour. As Bear said, she sleeps through most of her alarms, even though she sets them many times and they're quite loud. She eats little or no breakfast because we are always in a rush because she gets up so late. Occasionally she'll have a muffin, and she's too tired to engage in conversation on the way to school. Luke, my 7th grader, this is his first year of the early start. He's in the back seat of my car as we're driving to school, and he's yawning every morning in the back. He doesn't take the bus because that would require him to get up even earlier. Luke is irritable, less social after school, saying he's too tired. Bear, who has been at St. Luke's since 7th grade, he looks and feels rested in the morning. He sits at the kitchen table and eats a healthy breakfast around 8 or 8:30 each day. He has a positive outlook, on his day, and he engages in conversation with me in the morning. He plays 2 varsity sports and is very social. My husband and I have seen firsthand what more sleep can do for our children. It's time for a change, New Canaan.
Thank you. Can't read this last name, but Maria Magliacano? Yes. Okay, great.
Good evening. Maria Magliacano, 117 Elm Place. I have kids, 2 of which are at South School, one who is a 7th grader at St. Luke's, and one in preschool. I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner and a substitute school nurse in all of the New Canaan public schools and private schools, and a nurse consultant at 2 New Canaan preschools. I'm also on the PTC board at South School. My job offers me a great opportunity to see how kids look and hear how they feel. To see how kids look and hear how they feel at different start times. I see how tired the 7th through 12th grader kids are at 7:30 in the morning. Most of them must wake up between 6 to 6:30 a.m. Our children are not getting enough sleep. We have all heard of the health benefits of sleep, from decreased rates of obesity and depression to improved safety, academic performance, and quality of life. We know the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that children and adolescents get 9 hours of sleep a night. Furthermore, puberty brings about biological changes that make going to bed early very hard for adolescents. For these reasons, I'm in full support of a late start to improve the health and well-being of the students. As a parent, I see the health benefits in my 7th grader, who now starts at 9 a.m. twice a week and 8 a.m. 3 times a week at St. Luke's. She's happy and well-rested. I personally love the staggered start times because it really allows for a bonus sleep hour in the middle of the week, as well as time to eat a healthy breakfast. It would be short-sighted to think we can push all the start times back and stay within the same school times we have now. I think we have to think creatively to make this work, making tough choices, changing school schedules, and keeping in mind that academics and student health come before sports and extracurricular activities. St. Luke's rearranged their entire class schedule and the school day to get it done. My alma mater, Stevenson High School in Lincolnshire, Illinois, one of the top-ranked public schools in the nation with over 4,000 kids, went from an 8:05 a.m. start time to an 8:35 a.m. start time a few years ago. They decreased class periods to 47 minutes, extended the school year by a few days to get it done. I know that there is still a lot of work to be done and it might be difficult, but if other districts throughout the country and in Fairfield County can get it done, I'm confident that we can do it too. Our children are counting on us.
Thank you. Megan Steele.
Good evening, everyone. I am Megan Steele. People say we should look at history to not repeat mistakes of the past. I say, let's look at history to be reminded of what worked well here so we can make some better decisions today. Growing up here in the 70s and 80s, school started later and the school day was shorter. This enabled us to get more sleep. Yet we covered all of the required curriculum, did many after-school activities, and several of my over 400 classmates went on to attend MIT, Yale, Williams, Penn, Brown, and Columbia, among others. 4 elementary schools included grades K through 6 and all started and ended at the same times. Students were on the same schedule, so after-school activities were easy to coordinate. SACs included only grades 7 and 8, and the high school was grades 9 through 12. We too had an open campus and a rotating schedule with free periods. However, we started school at 8:05 and we ended at 2:15. The school day was not 6 hours and 35 minutes long, and we did not start at 7:30 a.m. Now let's consider busing, homework, and traffic. We didn't miss the bus because we woke easily in the light of day and we were well rested. We ate a good breakfast daily because we had time to do so and we weren't trying to eke out more sleep at the expense of not eating. We didn't need coffee or other adult stimulants to stay awake mornings, and we didn't routinely pull late-nighters. Our homework load was more manageable, and there were no 11:59 p.m. online deadlines. Traffic really wasn't an issue around schools in the morning. School start times did not coincide with rush hour, parents didn't need to drive kids to school, and only those who opted out of the bus system drove themselves. Why and when did all of this change? If Connecticut law requires a minimum of 180 days and 900 hours of instruction per year, then why does New Canaan go for 182 days? Why does New Canaan require more gym credit than is required of teens next door in Darien? Don't our athletes already spend enough time exercising each week after school at practice and in games? Should the schedule for all students be based on the needs of athletes? Why not create a flex study hall at the end of the day to allow for earlier departure times for athletes for away games as needed? How many away games occur each week during the regular season? And do all away games really warrant early departures? Perhaps not.
Megan, 30 seconds.
Oh, busing. Is it really so efficient? The drop-off lines at Saks and New Canaan High School tell a very different story. Ask the grade level secretaries who issue all of the late day passes every single day. These numbers are excessive, and these women can provide valuable insight. Tardiness represents a significant loss of academic time, and if our kids are exhausted, they will be tardy. Our children deserve better. Over 600 parents have asked you already to do this for their many, many more children. And I think we can use the resources of our Board of Ed, our administration, and so many bright minds in this community to get it done right, and get it done now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's okay. Tinley Gilbert.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Tinley Gilbert. I live at 54 Rocky Brook Road. I'm a mom of 4 kids, 3 of whom are currently at Saks and East Schools. My 4th is only 3, so I have 15 more years to go. I attended the focus group on October 24th along with many parents, and while there was a lot of discussion around the impact changing the start time could have on academics, athletics, timing, traffic, I kept thinking to myself, what are we really solving for? What are we trying to address? The impact of school timing on adolescent sleep is such an important issue that in 2016, the World Economic Forum addressed this through an article by a senior fellow. In this article, it was noted that in teens, the secretion of the sleep hormone melatonin begins at about 10:45 p.m. and continues until 8 a.m. Teens are unable to fall asleep until melatonin secretion begins and are not able to awaken until it stops. According to the National Sleep Foundation, the sleep requirement for teenagers is between 8 to 10 hours per night. This would suggest that the earliest healthy wake-up time for teens should not be before 7 a.m. So I would submit that it's not just about them going to bed earlier, taking away their screens, reducing activities or homework. It's about their biorhythms, their bodies. They go to bed later and need more sleep. The World Economic Forum also noted the negative impacts of lack of sleep. Teens who are sleep deprived are significantly more likely to use cigarettes, drugs, and alcohol. The incidence of depression among teens significantly rises with less than 9 hours of sleep. Feelings of sadness and hopelessness increase from 19% up to nearly 52% in teens who sleep 4 hours or less per night. And teen car crashes, though, are found to significantly decline when teens obtain more than 8 hours of sleep. So I got myself back to my original question. What are we solving for? I found myself asking, would it even matter if my child was a D1 athlete or a neurophysicist or a marketer if they were sleep deprived, depressed, angry, tired? This issue is bigger than New Canaan. Schools in our conference have already made changes, some recently and some like Wilton over 15 years ago. It won't be easy, but if we keep coming back to what are we solving for, then I think our North Star is clear. I'll close with the experience of my high school, which is also Maria's, just outside of Chicago. Similar to us in demographics, academics with over 80% of their seniors taking college-level courses, and a stellar athletic program. They made the change for 2016 and are consistently ranked one of the top 5 public schools in the nation. They did it to improve the health of their students, and they did it despite logistical issues. They pull from 6 other districts, which include 23 elementary and middle schools. Every school, every town had to adjust. But they did it because it was the right thing to do, and soon after, other schools followed suit. We are a closed system. The research clearly states that this is what is best for our children's health. So I ask again, what are we solving for? If it's for our children's health, then let's get to work creating solutions for their improved physical, emotional, and mental health. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Heather Moore. Heather Moore.
I'm number 6. Can I switch to number 14 who has to leave early? Is that?
Sure. Yep. Go right ahead. All right.
We have a basketball draft tonight. We're all parents
do that.
multitasking. First, I'd like to thank the BOE for their service. I too serve on multiple boards, both public and private. While doing so, I try to gauge what other boards around me are working on, what challenges they face, what issues they're working on, what are the results, and should I expect the same results to come my way as a board member. Anticipating these, reading the tea leaves, can save hundreds of man-hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars. When over half a dozen schools surrounding New Canaan have already invested the time, done the study, met the cost, and moved to a later start time, guess what? It's a tidal wave, and it's coming our way. The later start time wave is not unique to us, and it clearly shows no sign of stopping. Our own NCHS counselors rightfully tell our children, you can't stop the wave, but you can learn how to surf. Fighting this wave will likely be a waste of time and money. Let's figure out how to surf.
Thank you. Heather Moore. Would you like to come now? Yeah.
Hi. My name is Heather Moore, and I have 2 children, a 10th grader and a 7th grader, and I live at 79 Rilling Ridge. We keep hearing changing start times won't solve all of our teens' problems. We know that. But changing start times to allow teens at least the option to get enough sleep is a fundamental step in addressing their levels of anxiety, stress, and depression. The New Canaan public school community cares for and invests in its students. We have the best and the brightest educators, caring, dedicated counselors, and a committed staff. To that end, the New Canaan School District has recently begun the implementation of an emotional intelligence initiative, which is currently being rolled out across the district. This program follows the protocol created by Dr. Mark Brackett, founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. We recently had the pleasure of hearing him speak at Sachs Middle School. Dr. Brackett spoke to our parents about strategies to keep our children mentally and physically healthy. I was struck by one particular slide he discussed. After polling 22,000 high school students regarding how they felt at school, he developed a word graph to display the results. I was surprised to see that stressed was not the big winner. The most predominant feeling that high schoolers have is tired. More than any other feeling in the world, high schoolers are tired. Dr. Brackett went on to say that it's very difficult to regulate your emotions when you haven't had enough sleep, and that adequate sleep is a prerequisite to emotional intelligence, resilience, and happiness. He also stated that how kids feel in school will drive their learning, and that's a quote. Unfortunately, our teenagers feel tired. We as a district have already embraced the philosophy and strategies laid out by Dr. Brackett. We have invested both money and time for training and education in his program. Dr. Brackett clearly stated that adequate sleep is a necessary component of emotional intelligence. Why would we spend the time and resources to implement this program district-wide, but ignore his warnings about the mental health of sleep-deprived teenagers? Are we really not going to listen to the mental health professional who devised the wellness program that we have embraced? This is a core issue which we can solve. Other districts have done it. It is a nationwide wellness trend, and New Canaan's elected officials should be racing to complete the due diligence to make the change to an 8:30 a.m. start time. Our students' health is way more important than any scheduling obstacles in our way. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Speranza. Linda Speranza.
Hi, I'm Linda Speranza. I live on 262 Lukeswood Road. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm a school teacher from White Plains for 25 years. I have 3 children, and I moved from White Plains to New Canaan because it's known for being the best in education. And White Plains is wonderful, but it's a different community, and it's amazing, and you should know that. The rigor is so impressive. My son, when he started 7th grade, having to get up so early, 6 in the morning, he was like, oh my gosh, Mom, how am I going to do it? And he's so anxious already. And as a teacher, I'm up with him, and we get the day going. It's just shocking to me with the rigor of this district, so impressive how this is ignored. So I'm happy to be here. My children are in 4th, 6th, and 8th grade now. And I'm concerned for my daughter. She's a straight A student, and next year, guess what? You're getting up an hour earlier. Keep it up. You know, keep playing your trumpet. Keep playing softball. You know, it's just an hour's sleep you're missing. And then I'll have to worry about her with sports and being more tired. And I'm not downplaying anything that New Canaan has to offer. It's really amazing coming in. It's just, I'm hearing that other districts have it, so you're this amazing, why don't you? You know? So I have so much more on my mind. I'm happy for this short time to talk with you. And so many things that everyone has said are so heartfelt. And you can tell that they're really devoted to this community. So I hope you hear it all. Thank you.
Thanks. Steve Eno.
Steve Eno, 133 Springwater Lane. I have a 7th grader and a now college freshman. And probably one of the best things she says about college is only 2 days a week she has class before 10 o'clock. But that's not why I wanted to talk to you. We had an election this month. Every candidate for office in this state made their opinion known on things like the economy, taxes, God forbid, tolls on merit and I-95. Their opinions differed. They didn't necessarily have a concrete plan that addressed every little issue, but every candidate had an opinion. Now, this isn't as important as our state's economy, taxes, tolls, et cetera, but I think it's hard to find a single town-specific item with more attention from New Canaan parents than this one. So I think just like state office candidates were expected to have an opinion about the economy, I think it's fair for all of you on the Board of Education to have an opinion about this. Not your opinion on the guiding principles, the health studies, athletic schedules, busing, traffic, none of that. Just to be able to answer a simple question. Do you support a later start time for our teenagers? And I haven't heard that yet. It would be really nice if we could hear that from all of you. Thank you.
Thanks. Karen Willett.
Hi, I'm Karen Willett at 60 Springwater Lane, neighbors with Steve, I guess. I get the sense that our leadership is looking for more proof, more data from other schools that changing start times works. There is plenty of research that shows that it does work in the way that we parents define it. It works if our kids are getting more sleep. And this isn't the opinion of a few doctors and advocates. It is the consensus of every major medical organization. And most importantly, it is the consensus of every pediatrician here in town, our own children's doctors. These doctors do not have agendas or ulterior motives. Why are we second-guessing their recommendations? And just to clarify those recommendations, They did not just say that teen sleep deprivation is a problem and changing school start times can help fix it. They showed that early school start times are a major cause of the dangerous levels of sleep deprivation in adolescents. That early school start times are a structural barrier to teens getting enough sleep. Yes, teens can get more sleep by improving their bedtime habits, but even with the perfect sleep hygiene, until we change start times, they can never get enough sleep. And their research also showed that changing start times is a solution. When start times change, teens get more sleep. Problem, cause, and solution. But as parents, we don't really need the research to tell us this. We see it every morning when we wake up our kids at 6. We have no doubt that they would be better off if they could sleep another hour. Like other 7th grade parents said, we remember what our kids were like in the 6th grade. Sleep was not an issue. Our kids weren't exhausted every morning. They didn't sleep through 2 alarms. We didn't have to go into their rooms 4 times to get them out of bed just 15 minutes before the bus. They didn't sleep in their clothes or skip breakfast. That all started on the first day of 7th grade, when our school system began to systematically take an hour of sleep from them every school day. I don't know of any parent who would say that their kids' lives improved when that happened. I think the reason that we elect a Board of Education is to ensure that our school district is doing what is best for our kids. So can any of you make the argument that our kids are better off sleeping an hour less every day this year and for the next 5 years than they did last year? Can you make the argument that they are no worse off sleeping, say, 8 hours instead of 9, or 7 instead of 8? If you can't do that, then we must follow the logic. We elect our BOE and hire the best administrators and teachers to do what is best for our kids.
You have 30 seconds.
And taking an hour of sleep away is not good for them. It is harmful to them. So let's give that hour back. Thank you.
Thank you. Vivian Birdsall.
I'm Vivian Birdsall. I'm the president of the New Canaan Education Association. New Canaan teachers, first and foremost, are concerned with the welfare of our students. We're committed to doing what's right for every student. In order to make an informed decision on this issue of school start time, it's imperative that we look at the data closely. There are some questions that need to be answered specifically related to New Canaan students. What exactly are we trying to accomplish? What specific data has been gathered from Fairfield County schools who have moved their school start times later? Have we interviewed the districts who have decided against it? Will students take advantage of the extra time to sleep or use the morning for extra help in clubs? Has anyone surveyed the students to ask them about these questions? What would be the impact of freezing period 1 and allowing students who want to sleep in that opportunity by putting their free period during period 1 and allowing them to come to school period 2? Can this be a preliminary step to test the impact? This is a big decision and should be made with extreme caution. Thank you.
Thank you. EJ Netter.
Good evening, EJ Netter, 1035 Valley Road. So normally I would not be here speaking at a hearing like this, but my wife and I feel very passionate about this topic. We have 4 children, the oldest being a 6th grader at Sac School. And we are pretty diligent about getting him to bed at somewhere between 9 and 9:30 every night. And that's really hard with their challenging schedules. And we watch every morning as he tries to get up at 7 a.m. to get ready for school and get out to the bus. And that's with a later start time today. I'm not sure what's going to happen if we have him now getting up earlier to get to school at 7:30 a.m. I just don't know how he's going to be able to get up in the morning and function well and be able to concentrate and perform well in school. It's hard enough with a wake-up time of 7 a.m. That's going to get earlier if we have a start time that's before 8:30 a.m. So my wife and I are very strongly supportive of having 8:30 a.m. start time, and I encourage all of you to take this seriously and think about the impact on all our children in the community if we have an early start time. So thank you for your time this evening. Thank you.
Thanks. Janie Conadaris. Yeah, okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to apologize now for how fast I'm about to talk. Though I do not know you personally, I believe that each member of our Board of Education cares deeply about our town, and especially our children, which is why I'm troubled by the snail's pace evaluation of how New Canaan can move towards a healthier start time. I'm troubled because you know all the medical research, yet you appear extremely reluctant to follow it. This is not new research. It's well-established research. The Board of Education heard it back in 2006, when the League of Women Voters of New Canaan thoroughly researched this issue and published its 55-page report. The report concluded that, and keep in mind, this is before the iPhone and smartphones and other things that we say keep teens up. The report concluded that adolescent sleep deprivation is a serious public health issue that must be addressed, that older New Canaan students are sleep deprived, and that the 7:30 a.m. start time is incompatible with the sleep needs of adolescents, and that New Canaan public schools should investigate all options to implement later start times for 7th through 12th grade. As part of that report, the League of Women Voters surveyed parents who overwhelmingly agreed that there was a clear need and desire for change. That survey asked specific questions and it got specific answers. For instance, 85% of high school parents agreed that it would be acceptable for extracurriculars to start and finish later if school started later. And 74% of parents felt their child would perform better if he or she just got more sleep. The information from that 2006 survey was clear and useful. Now compare that to the confusing Hanover survey presented to parents, teachers, and students last spring. It appeared that no one even told Hanover that SACS has 2 different start times, which rendered useless the data collected from SACS parents. Putting aside the issues with SACS, the Hanover report didn't even show us how much sleep our high school students are or are not getting. The Hanover report generated charts to show the average sleep hours of all students, grades 12 through K lumped together. We have asked Dr. Lutzy to reach out to Hanover for the chart showing sleep patterns of high school students only, but to date, we are still waiting for those results. The Board of Education has not followed through on promises to create a working committee that includes parents to identify viable options as to how a later start time could work. So is it the position of the Board of Education that all the medical experts are wrong?
It's 30 seconds.
That as long as the New Canaan test scores remain high, sleep isn't important? Where are our priorities? Since when does this town disregard doctors? This town cares deeply about the wellness of all of its residents. Does the Board of Education hesitate when medical experts recommend that our students receive vaccinations or eat healthy foods? Sleep is essential to the wellness of our children. And as the local doctors have attested, New Canaan teenagers aren't getting enough sleep. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Camp. Thanks. Yeah.
Hello, Karen Camp, 34 Adams Lane. This past month, I heard news of a local school district that was faced with a health and safety problem that gravely threatened their students and staff's well-being. They formed a task force consisting of school administration and community leaders. They consulted medical experts, investigated background causes and consequences, and solicited input from all stakeholders. They swiftly implemented a comprehensive solution that required overcoming significant logistical obstacles. This was in Stamford, when the Westover School had to be closed due to a pervasive mold problem. In less than 2 weeks, students and staff were returned to a healthy and safe learning environment at a new location. I wish that New Canaan Public Schools were treating school start times with the same degree of gravity, intensity, creativity, and urgency. I wish that New Canaan Public Schools would consult medical experts about the detriments to both physical and mental health that early school start times cause for our teens. I wish that all affected groups were at the table. I wish that we would consider all the evidence from medical and educational researchers about the dangers to health, damage to mental well-being, increased risks of substance abuse and vehicle accidents, and negative impacts on school achievement and athletic performance. I wish that this process wouldn't drag on any longer than it already has, since it is nearly too late for any solution to help my family. My 16-year-old high school junior wanted me to tell you that getting up for school is the low point of my life, and that's a quote. He can only get about 6 hours of sleep each night, which is almost 3 hours less daily than his college-age brother. He says it has become unmanageable this year with the difficulty of junior year with harder courses, homework, and varsity sports. The days when he has first period free, he says, are like gold. And last week, when he had a 2-hour delay and got to sleep in, he got on the bus energized and ready to focus on school. Totally different than a normal day. Don't we want all of our students to feel this way every day? There is convincing evidence that we are harming our teenagers on a daily basis, and the time has come for us to address this clear and present danger. We in New Canaan aspire to provide the highest quality of education for the students in our care, and this is something that we must do. You as school leaders do many things to enable our schools to be the best they can be, investing in great teachers, administrators, and resources for excellence, not just good enough. Unfortunately, the current school start schedule is worse than that. It actually puts our kids in danger, akin to the public health emergency in Stamford. The time is now to move forward to align our schedules with what is best for our students' education, overall health, mental health, and success. The question isn't why are we considering later start times, that we need to see more evidence to be convinced. The question is why aren't we?
Thank you. Marilyn Harasiak? Okay. Allison Zinsenko?
Hi, I'm Allison Zinsenko, 1580 Ponus Ridge. I've been a resident of New Canaan for a year and a half. We have an 8th grader and a 6th grader. We came from a school district in New York that had started at 9 a.m. Here, my older child has become a different kid in the morning, and it's really upsetting to watch. My 6th grader eats breakfast, is his cheerful self, and he can even take another look at homework problems that he may have been stuck on the night before because he has time to focus. On the flip side, my 8th grader, she chooses precious minutes of sleep over eating breakfast. She walks down the driveway in the dark to meet her 6:30 a.m. bus. She's stressed, anxious, unhappy, and not the sunny girl she used to be in the mornings. There have been a few mornings where we have opted to send her in after first period, when she's been up as late as 11:30 the night before with homework. I don't think missing class time and teacher instruction is the best solution, but something's got to give when her bus comes at 6:38. I know from school staff and from parents that other families are doing the same thing. We're requiring our teenagers to wake before they're ready and perform at a high level on very little sleep. Eventually, this breaks them down, and there's no such thing as catching up on sleep on the weekends. It just creates a jet lag of sorts when the weekend rhythm is so out of sync with the weekday rhythm. Our early start time is most definitely not giving our children what they need to succeed. It's surprising, really. We moved here and we love this town, and it's such a town of achievers. When we see a need, we research, gather information, raise money if needed, mobilize, and enact change. New turf fields, computers for every student at Saks, a dream vacation for the crossing guard, and new playground equipment at Meade. I've seen it time and time again in just 18 months of living here. And yet, despite the research about the impact of sleep on the health and well-being of our children, our school district has this blind spot. I do understand that changing the start time is obviously more complex than raising money for playground equipment, but there's nothing that's more important than our children's well-being. Matthew Walker, the founder and director of the Center for Human Sleep Science at UC Berkeley,
30
put
seconds.
it best. He says, sleep is the greatest legal performance-enhancing drug for skill learning and memory. As a parent, I'm here to ask for the most natural thing in the world to enhance my child's health and happiness. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather Boulanger.
Hello, my name is Heather Bollinger. I'm not
sorry.
that fancy, sorry.
I like that. Fancy.
And my address
Nice.
is 23 Kelly Green, New Canaan. I'm here tonight to express my support for finding a path to a later start time for the high school and middle school. I'm currently the parent of a 6th grader and a 3rd grader. We live close to town, and my kids enjoy the ability to walk to and from school. When we moved here 2 years ago from Chicago area, it never dawned on me to look at the start times for 7th and beyond. I am alarmed and concerned that starting next year, my 12-year-old will be walking in the dark in late October, late November, early December, and January, because we will no longer receive bus service either when he starts going to be at school at 7:30. I recently attended the focus group meeting as an observer. I left wondering if our Board of Education and administration truly understood why we as parents feel this is an important change to make. The meeting focused on all of the reasons the adults in the room couldn't change. Very little attention was given to why the later start time is the healthier choice for our school district, which is focused on emotional intelligence. Change happens. It happens every year. We changed as a family when we moved here. Please don't let our fear of change get in the way of progress and making the right and often complicated and tough choices to best serve our students and support their physical and emotional well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're 45 minutes in. We have about 8 people left. We okay extending the timeline? Yeah. We have a vote. All those in favor? Thanks. If we could just hold it to 2 minutes, that would be preferred. Elise Pitts, is that right?
She'll let you know.
Good evening. Elise Pitts. I'm at 54 Elm Place. I've been there for 13 years now. I want to thank the Board of Ed for even considering this as an option, because I think it's a great idea. I'm in full support of it. I have a 7th grader and I have 2 5th graders. My 7th grader, we don't have a bus, so she walks to school in the morning. She's able to leave at about 7:10. It means she gets up at about 6:15 to 6:30 to get there. But I do have a lot of friends who have to get on the bus at 6:30 in the morning, and it's very challenging for them to do that. So many times they drive. They get driven to school. I did try and drive through town today at 8 a.m. It was virtually impossible to do. Living on Elm Place, the intersection getting to Main Street and Farm or getting to South Avenue and Farm, it was backed up all the way practically to Harrison on both streets. So it's very, very challenging if you want to leave and get anywhere between 7:30 and 8:15 in the morning. And I did speak with my 7th grader about it. She says she feels badly for her first period class because it's basically everybody is a zombie during that class. They're just walking in a daze. And she said that she would really benefit from a later start time, not dramatic, if it were just a half an hour like it was last year. And I have 2 more kids in a couple of years that will be doing exactly the same thing. So we're going to be really, really struggling, I think, to get everybody up and out. So I really appreciate you guys looking at this. And I've been a part of a lot of these kind of conversations, not with the Board of Ed, but I was part of the sidewalk discussion. I was part of the expand SACS discussion. There were definite, no camps and yes camps on that. I mean, you go to those meetings and there were deaf people that definitely said, we don't want it or we want it. This, I think the biggest adversarial comment is we should do more research on it, but generally the idea is it's something that should be very seriously considered. It's the first time I've ever been to something like this where there hasn't been any kind of disagreement on such an important thing. So thank you again, and I'm glad to be a part of these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Rucci.
I'm Barbara Rucci. I live at 697 Valley Road. I have 3 children. One is in college now, a freshman. I have a 7th grader and a 10th grader. Later start times isn't a fad. It isn't going away. Even if we put it aside now, it'll come up again, and we'll be wasting time and money going through all of this again, just like we did in 2006. But we don't need to do it reluctantly. We have the chance here to be innovators and to execute this change better than anyone. Let's do it well, and let's market it as one more way that we put our students first. This is what the private schools around us are doing. They're smart. The private schools see that in the future, teens will not be starting school at 7:30. And they're changing their start times now and marketing that fact, so they can be there to snap up all the families that get tired of waiting for the public schools to make the change. If we do this with commitment and optimism, and especially with buy-in from our staff and parents, we can create a schedule that works better for students than any other public school schedules around us. It will be just one more reason for people to prefer living here over other towns close by. And if we don't do it and let others around us do it first and get the word out, will New Canaan be able to hold on to its top ranking? This isn't just the right thing to do for the kids. It's the smart and competitive thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Lucy Dathan.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you to all the Board of Ed who are here this evening. This is a lot of work and it's a lot of effort and a lot of people, and I just appreciate your time and your service over the years. My name's Lucy Dathan. I live 950 Silver Mine Road. I'm a mom of 3 kids, 15, 13, and 11. And tonight I'm speaking as a parent and not as an elected official, as a state representative. At the meeting back in June, the board had voted to form a committee in September to begin discussing later school start times. We understood that this committee would include all stakeholders, including parents. As of today, as far as I'm aware, that doesn't seem to have happened, and no one from the board has mentioned it again. I'd like to know what the board would be doing with the information that they hear today and what the specific timeline of action is. I've been a part of this committee, the School Start Time Committee, for over 2 years, and we've been taking one small step every 6 months, and we seem to be no closer to doing the hard work of an implementation plan. I totally understand that we want to ensure that we evaluate the issue properly to ensure success and to learn from the mistakes of a hasty implementation with our neighbors, as I discussed with Deanna. I would also like to know how we can have a healthy debate when all communication appears to be one way. I believe it's the obligation of our board to let us know what they're thinking about this, because it's a very important topic to our community, so that everyone in our community knows where they stand and we can discuss it openly. So in summary, my question is, what are we going to do next week, next month specifically, to make a decision on this? And what are you going to form an actual working committee to do this hard work? Thank you.
William and Alex Dathan.
Hi, my name's Will Dathan, and I'm 15 years old. I also live at 950 Silver Mine Road. I'm a sophomore at New Canaan High School, and every morning I wake up at 6 a.m., and it causes me a lot of trouble. It leads to me having, it leads to my performance being affected negatively, my appetite being worse, but most of all, my mood. Every morning I feel grumpy and unenthused, and if you ask any teacher, they'll say that's normal for teenagers now. If you were thinking I'm tired because I'm up too late on my phone, that's simply not true. My phone goes away at 9 p.m., and I'm usually in bed by 9:30. Yet, even though I should be getting 8 hours of sleep a night, I end up only getting 6 or 7 because I usually don't fall asleep until 10:30, 11, just because that's what's normal for teens. You can't keep sending kids to bed earlier and earlier. It doesn't mean that they'll sleep. The best thing you can do is go to bed at a natural time and wake up later. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Alex Dathan. I live in 950 Silver Mine Road, and I'm in 7th grade. I haven't really much experience waking up at 6. I wake up at 6 o'clock. Not much. I've been since last year. My grades have been awesome, and now this year they've been going down. But then I started working harder to improve them, which I'm also trying to get more sleep at the same time. I'm currently going to sleep around 8:50 while I'm in bed, so I get around 9 hours of sleep, which I'm hoping to try to improve my grades.
Thank you. Meg Joyce.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Meg Joyce, 507 Silvermine Road. I'm the mother of 4 children, ages 16 to 25, all of whom have had busy after-school schedules all or most of the school year. 2 of my children attended a local independent high school that started at 8:15. A third attended a boarding school that switched to an 8:30 start time his freshman year. My youngest has gone all through the New Canaan schools. She's a junior now at New Canaan High School. So we have essentially conducted a school start time experiment right in my own home, and I can tell you the effects of an early start, such as ours, are profound. My youngest has to wake up an hour earlier or more than her siblings did each day, and it shows. It's nearly impossible to awaken her. She sleeps through multiple alarms, and I have to resort to threats and punishments to get her out the door every single day. No time is left for even a simple breakfast. Attitudes are terrible. The day feels ruined before it's even begun. This is the case regardless of actual bedtime, and let's be honest, how many teenagers are able to get to bed and actually fall asleep before 10 or 10:30? I'm confident my daughter's not fully alert until well after the school bell is rung, probably not until second period. I worry what will happen when she gets her driver's license in the next few weeks and starts driving herself to school, still half asleep. Can you guess which one of my children experienced a significant mood change when she started high school? My bright and sunny child was no longer so bright and sunny. There's no doubt in my mind that the early wake-up time has been a big factor. My daughter acts exactly the way you or I would if we were chronically sleep-deprived and had zero control over our schedules. Irritable, forgetful, overwhelmed, and unhappy. It's been hard to watch. This fall, though, there's been a 360-degree change. And you know what? My daughter has 2 single-period sleep-ins and 2 double-period sleep-ins in her schedule this semester. She can handle life's daily challenges because she's no longer constantly exhausted. My fingers and toes are crossed for a similarly blessed schedule next semester, but I know it's not sustainable. No child should have to pray for the chance of a late start in their rotating schedules, as sleep-ins are rare indeed. We are harming our children and do not have to inflict this misery upon them. We can make a difference every single day in our children's daily lives right now. Please, I urge you, do the right thing and let our teenagers get the sleep we know they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Andre Elgarahi.
I'm Andre Elgarahi, residing at 1209 Oak Ridge. I'm a mother of 4 children, 3 of them very young at West Elementary. Last year, my son started at Saks in 6th grade, and he was doing great. He was doing good grades and able to do lots and lots of sports after school. I had overheard many parents saying, "Oh, wait till he starts school next year. You're going to see why we moved out of Saks, why we went to a different school or moved to a different town." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "You'll see." So then 7th grade comes, grumpy all the time, never eats breakfast, puts on his clothes at night so that he doesn't have to get up so early in the morning. And he is just a different person, and I have him in other curriculums outside of the school. They call me. He's so tired all the time. Why is he so tired? I said, well, the people that told me, wait till you see what happens next year, were right. And all of the people here are amazing with all their information of doctors said this and these scientists and all this stuff, which is great. But the truth is, you just see it for yourself with your own children in your home and what they go through and how I feel it is very important. I'm also a nutritional detoxification specialist, and I can tell you one thing. When we are ill, what's the most important thing that you need? Rest. Your body heals when you are sleeping. So I believe that we can do this together, because I have friends that moved to Richfield. I have other people that moved out just to go to different schools for a later start. We are all here together, and thank you so much for staying later to hear all of us. But we can do this, and we are going to do this, because it's for the best interest of the children. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sal Sorbara. Okay, thanks. Inga Smith.
Hi, my name is Inga Smith. I live at 71 Turner Hill Road. I don't have a prepared speech. I just wanted to say I'm a mother of a 10th grader. My daughter doesn't get more than 6. She's lucky to get 6.5 hours of sleep. With the amount of schoolwork that, you know, if you're in all honors and advanced classes and 2 varsity teams, there's simply no time for anything. She falls asleep absolutely anywhere she can get 15 minutes, whether it's in the car, on the way to her tennis practice, or wherever it is. You know, I find her sleeping, and she calls them power naps. She's exhausted. She's never made the school bus because even 15 minutes makes a difference. Forget about breakfast. All she wants to do is just roll out of bed, put on her clothes, and make it to school on time. And I think the reason why there's such a gigantic gridlock is because a lot of parents like us are doing exactly the same thing. They're sacrificing themselves to drive the kids to school to give them that extra 15 or 20 minutes of sleep. I also wanted to say, you know, somebody earlier said that it appears to be a one-way process. I joined the New Canaan Mothers group on Facebook. There's a group through that for the later school times. And it appears to me that there's an overwhelming support among parents that I've spoken to, parents on Facebook, you know, who are all in favor of giving our teenagers ideally additional hour of sleep. And what I'm saying about not a transparent process, I feel like we don't really know where you guys all stand. We have made ourselves very clear that we would like to see this happen, but we don't really know what is going to be the next step. The questionnaire that was given was very confusing and difficult, especially for children, difficult to understand. I got confused, you know, looking through, you know, trying to answer the questionnaire. It would be ideal if in this process, all of you on the Board of Education would really take into consideration the health and the well-being of our children. And I don't know if it's going to happen before my daughter graduates from New Canaan High School, but I can tell you that the one thing she will take away with her, you know, having graduated from New Canaan High School, is how she was always sleep deprived. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly and TJ Jetnil. Coming up? I don't know. No. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Can you just tell us your name?
My name is Alberto Ocio Carrasco. I live on 279 Smith Ridge Road. And
Thank you.
I am an 8th grader at Sachs Middle School, so I'm experiencing getting up at 6 to catch the school bus. But everybody has been saying how it's unhealthy for students to get up at the time that they're getting up. But I don't think anybody has really listed what could happen if there was a later start time. After school activities would be later, and most after school activities would have less time for the things that they're doing, and kids that walk home after those after school activities would walk in the dark home, and most school would end later, meaning that they would have less time to do their homework, which would ultimately have them going to sleep later. And I do not see how it would help if the Board of Education made the school start time later, because I just don't really see how it would help if this time it'd just be moving the schedule from 1 hour to another, and it wouldn't have much of an effect because everybody would just be they'd get the same amount of sleep each night as if it was a normal schedule. And it's not healthy. Like, both ways, it's not healthy. So it just wouldn't really work. Thank you.
Thank you. We're done. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate all the comments that you've made. We're definitely taking them to heart, and we'll be, as you've heard, continuing to study this topic and ultimately make a decision. We'll be talking some more about this at the regular meeting, which is happening right after this. And we'll be getting a presentation on various options as it relates to start times and impact on transportation. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn? Penny? Second? Jen? All those in favor? Thank you. We're adjourned.
Do you want to just give
2
3
minutes?
minutes? 3 minutes,
Okay.
5 minutes?
All right.
Yep, okay.
Thank you.
All right.
So don't wander. We'll do like 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Not on.
Got it?
Yep.
It should be now.
I'd like to call the November 19th, 2018 meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education to order. First up on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the November 5th meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Deanna? Sherry? All those in favor? Abstentions? Maria? Thank you. Next up is comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. Anyone? Okay. And next up is reports and recognition. Dr. Lutzy.
Yes, thank you, Brendan. Let me just jump to. Our first report will be from Mark Walsh of Transportation Consultants. Mark, if you'll come on up, and I'll just speak for a moment or two as we begin. As a few people mentioned earlier in the public hearing, the district has been looking at and doing quite a bit of research around school start times initiatives. That research has included contracting with a group to do a study, sort of a best practices study, looking at high-performing districts who have changed their school start times and looking to identify some of the constants in what helped to make them successful if they were successful in that change. Along with attending numerous conferences, also the survey that was mentioned earlier did provide some feedback and some information that was helpful in identifying sort of areas of consideration. The goal, I think, for the board, certainly for the administration as well, has been to learn as much as possible about the school start times question and issue in the context of student wellness. You know, we've really thought, and a few people have mentioned tonight, some of the initiatives that we've had around student wellness that we've been implementing in the last couple of years. Those things include the work, again, with emotional intelligence with Mark Brackett. There's also an internal wellness initiative for our staff, and other things that we've been doing district-wide with folks in order to help to promote healthy lifestyles and what have you. We are, as a district, fully committed to doing all that we can for the health and wellness of our students. The board, I know, is very supportive in that. We have our district goals annually that we revise, and we annually focus on our student wellness goals. We look at our school climate and those types of things, and there's always robust discussion about those and really an unwavering commitment to that. As we go into Mark's presentation tonight, I do want to just speak on behalf of the board just to share that really a guiding, after learning about this and attending conferences, sharing research, talking with folks in the community, out of the community, speaking with educational leaders from all different school districts, some that had committed to and made the change, some that had committed to and had to pull back from making the change, some that made it in different ways. There's all different sort of versions of this, but in speaking with all of them and sharing that information back with the board and talking together with others within the district administration and what have you, there is a guiding assumption that if the school board of education can do something that's good for students, then we're going to take a look at that. And the board is going to really analyze it, look into it, and see if it's the right thing and how to do that. There are people that I speak with who often they'll ask me as I start this conversation, they'll say, well, why are you looking at this? You're at New Canaan. Everybody else tries to be like you. Why are your students do great, the college acceptance, everything that goes on. And my answer to them has been, and it's reflective of I think the board, has been that, look, there's a lot of things going on right here, but it's our responsibility to look to continuously improve on behalf of our students. So we'll look at hard things, we'll look at difficult questions, and analyze our practices to see if there's a better way of doing what we're doing. That work can take time. And that's the feedback I think you hear about the time. There's never been an attempt to delay or purposely slow anything. This is purposeful work that takes time, conversation, research. And I appreciate many of the comments that commended the board and the administration, the work that we're doing, because this is very difficult work. It's not flipping a switch. It's a complex ecosystem around a school. And we have to, it's our responsibility to look at all of those things. Because again, as sort of proud practitioners in New Canaan, when we bring forward something and we're going to make a significant change, we want to be sure that we've looked at all of the outcomes of that, intended and unintended, to be sure that we're most prepared. So that work takes time. I don't want to use more than my 3 minutes, but I am very proud to introduce you to Mark Walsh, who has been working with our district for several months now. Mark has interviewed folks, and I know you're going to go through your presentation a bit and share, but I want to, out in the beginning, just commend Mark for really coming into this understanding that our approach is not to find a reason to plug in a solution that we've already discovered. The approach has been generative in that we've been learning and growing and exploring and trying to figure out what will work best. And I think that for a long-term sustainable solution, that's the best approach. And in a community that's surrounded by people who care so deeply about their schools, I believe that's what everyone here and everyone throughout the community deserves. So Mark, thank you for the approach that you brought to this work, and we look forward to hearing from you about your findings and answering some questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We've been proud to work with New Canaan to take a look at the transportation portion of your difficult decision, which is what we've been focused on. Throughout the study, when we were first engaged, in the engagement statement that we have is we were responsible to take a look at how you could achieve a goal of later start time from the aspect of transportation. What are the logistical transportation issues? What are options available to the district? What kind of parameters should be in place from a transportation end? What alternatives do you have? I know that in looking at the presentation, we call it a bell time options. I think it's important to realize option is simply a word. There are alternatives, there's options, there's scenarios, there's protocol, there's procedures. We could have called this anything, but it's taking a look at what kind of transportation alternatives might be available to achieve a later start time. We were not provided any artificial guidelines. The district did not say that you can only start at this time. They did not say that you had to end by a certain time. They did not put constraints on us. I think the only constraints that we looked at were constraints based upon our professional opinion. We've had an opportunity to do transportation consulting now for 31 years. I know it's shocking to think that I could have done this for 31 years, and I appreciate your thoughts because I could sense it. And we've had an opportunity to work in 22 states. We've worked for about 600 school districts, and we've had an opportunity to work with districts who've changed bell times, who've redistricted, who've turned their districts upside down. We've had the opportunity to work with districts who've evaluated bell times and have chosen not to. We've had districts that unfortunately looked at bell time changes or did some redistricting that didn't work. So we've had the opportunity to learn from success and learn from failure. So hopefully part of the advice and guidance that we can provide will help you eliminate some of the pitfalls that could occur from going through this process. In order to achieve this, we were first engaged by the district. We started off gathering an extensive amount of data from the district. I would like to commend the administration and the employees in the district. Everybody was super. We asked for an awful lot of information. Everybody gave us absolutely anything that we asked for. There were times that we came back and asked for something in one format to look like another format, and we received it. And that was very gratifying and very helpful. We had an opportunity to go through interviews. What we had asked the district is to give us an opportunity to talk to every stakeholder who wanted to talk to us. And so we spoke to individuals throughout the community, various administrators, building administrators, people in transportation who were fantastic. We interviewed with your contractor, parent representatives, and listened to their perspectives. And in many cases, during the interviews, I asked challenging questions. And in some cases, there were impressions that my attitude may have either been positive or negative towards the issue. And that wasn't the case. What I try to do in going through this process is to explore where people are coming from and why, because it helps give me insight of what the options might be within the school district, so as we start to develop parameters, we can work around them. Once we develop these parameters or options, at that point in time, we started to try to put some numbers to it. What would it cost? How many buses would be required? And these are the results. I think it's important to look at your current program. What's on the screen now is something, and I know the board all has copies of a presentation, and sometime when you want light reading, feel free to spend time and analyze the data. I won't go through too much time going through. You folks know your district, but it's important to set up what you are today. You're currently on what's called a three-tier system. Three basically segmented bell times. What it means is your buses can go out and do 3 runs, 3 routes, 3 tiers, whatever the terminology happens to be in the community. But it's an extremely efficient way to use transportation resources. You will find many times rural districts, small districts may do what's called a single tier. It means everybody from K-12 is on one bus. That's fascinating. Some districts do it. Your district couldn't conceivably do that and afford it. You have an existing contract which has been renewed now through 2022. Your existing contract operates and provides the services with DATCO, meeting the bell times and fortunately for the district, providing you a sufficient number of drivers. And as we look at this, that's an issue that I will talk about, because having resources is something that impacts what you can and cannot do. And it's not necessarily simply dollars. In looking at your current program, you basically have 33 buses per tier. 33 buses per tier means that for each tier, all the buses are being utilized. Drivers are guaranteed a certain length of day. Your drivers under your current labor agreement or the contractor's labor agreement are guaranteed 6 hours a day. By equalizing the number of vehicles, it most effectively utilizes the vehicles that you're being provided by your contractor. Alternatively, you could probably look at it and say, well, on one tier, maybe I could compress the kids more, and maybe in the second tier, I could drop 2 buses. It wouldn't save you any money to do that, because those buses are contracted for anyway. The drivers have a guaranteed length of day, and so there's no real benefit from trying to look at that kind of consolidation. Your current program has a set bell times. We have gathered data relative to the earliest pickup for students, the average pickup for students, the latest pickup for students for each of the tiers. It's important when you look at bell times to realize from a transportation perspective, we look at things backwards. And I appreciate it. You've got a couple board members nodding upside down. That's insulting. But, we have to look at things backwards because everything gets driven by the afternoon. In the morning, when buses pick up kids, they can show up at the buildings and they don't have to show up at the exact same minute. So they can show up, drop off kids, and go to their next tier. And there's some flexibility between when they can drop off the kids and when they can pick up the kids. You don't have that in the afternoon. In the afternoon, you have a bell time and school's dismissed. There's an industry standard that loading buses takes about 7 to 10 minutes. So when a parent looks at a bell time and your school says that you have a bell time of 2:30, that doesn't mean the buses go out on the road at 2:30. That means that the kids get dismissed from school at 2:30. Those buses really don't leave the yard or leave the school until 2:37, 2:40. So if you have 40 minutes between bell times in the afternoon, you don't really have 40 minutes where kids are on the buses. You have a bus that leaves 7 to 10 minutes after the bell time. That bus then goes out and does their entire route and has to get back to the next school for the next bell time. So keep in mind that as you look at bell times, it's the afternoon time spread that's the greatest determinant of what you can do. Your riding times average about 40 to 45 minutes in maximum. When you have a riding time of 45 minutes, keep in mind that's the longest ride time for one student. That doesn't mean all your students are on the bus for 45 minutes. Your average ride time, numerically, would tend to be 15 to 20 minutes. Because you have distances that you have to go, there may not be kids in between, and it's the longest ride for a single student. When you're looking at your ridership, you have groups of students. You have what are called non-assigned students, who are students who decided they don't want transportation. And you have students who walk to school and are not eligible for transportation. You then have students who are assigned to buses. And what the district does is assign those students who are eligible and who've chosen transportation and assign them to vehicles. That does not mean all those kids rode. When you look at your cost, and we have to have a basis for developing cost, what's on the screen now are your current contract costs, and that's for the current school year. You currently have 5 29 passenger vehicles. You're paying $536 a day. For cost projection purposes throughout our evaluation, we've utilized a 182-day school year, so we have consistency. You have 28 77 passenger buses at slightly more money. Basically, the difference is the capital cost. Your current program for the home to school portion, this has nothing to do with athletics, folks. This is just the 180-day school year, is about $3.2 million. That's your current program and your current contract. Just to make it easy, it means that a school bus costs you about $100,000 a year. So if you add a bus, you add $100,000. If you save a bus, you save $100,000. As guidelines, when we looked at this program, one thing we did not touch was the length of day for your schools. So throughout here and looking at bell times, the same length of educational day in the school building was maintained. It's important to keep in mind that our intent here is to give you some guidance and give you some ideas of what you can and cannot do. Nothing here is beyond being changed. As we look at options and guidelines, there are a limited number of permutations that we could go through. You have to focus on something to put things into perspective. So as we go through and look at the various programs, keep in mind that as you go through your deliberations, you may start off saying, we'd like to do this by 3 minutes. Could we modify this by 2 minutes? Anything can be modified to some degree. There may be a cost involved, but anything can be changed. The scheduled ridership and the actual ridership we assumed would stay the same because we have no basis to believe that it would change. And all of our cost projections stayed at your current levels. The first option we came up with is a 2-tier system instead of a 3-tier system. It creates a later start time for the secondary students and significantly increases the number of vehicles. It increases the number of vehicles because you're putting more kids on those vehicles in a 2-tier system as opposed to 3. You're not broken down into 2, 2, 2 anymore. You're now 3 and 3. And there are riding time issues which impact the number of vehicles. It's also important to keep in mind, and I will say this several times as I go through the presentation, this is an order of magnitude projection. Ultimately, when the board gets to a point that if you determine you want to make changes and you zero in on an option or an alternative or a potential program, eventually there will need to be a definitive, detailed routing, projection, analysis, and procedures established by your transportation department. That is time consuming and that's a whole lot of work. That will be the only way that you ultimately will know the exact number of buses. But we worked with the district. We believe on an order of magnitude basis, our numbers of buses that we projected are fairly accurate. In this case, we projected 47 buses for each of the 2 tiers. Could it be 46? Sure. Could it be 48? Absolutely. But we're going to be reasonably close. If in fact, using the numbers of buses on a two-tier system, looking at the parameters that we stated, you would have a cost of about $1.37 million incrementally over and above what you spend today. That's based on the current contract cost. Now, that's adding 14 buses. It is not utilizing them anywhere near as effectively or efficiently as you have today, because right now you're paying for a 6-hour labor day for the drivers, and part of the issue in transportation is finding drivers. You've been fortunate that you've been able to have a sufficient roster of drivers. Part of it is because of the labor agreement that they have, and that labor agreement provides a 6-hour day. If in fact you went to a two-tier system, if the district thinks that as a result of this, you could cut your day back and go to the contractors and the drivers and say, oh, by the way, we don't want 6 hours anymore, we now want to do 4 or 4.5. My experience in this area of Connecticut is you will have a very difficult time finding school bus drivers. But again, could you do this? Yes. Could you do a two-tier system? Yes. This is what it would take. And by the way, as we did these options, there's no priority. Option 1, 2, 3, and 4 does not mean that that's the order we think they ought to be in. It just happened to be what we assigned. Option 2 is a 15-minute later start time, end time for all the buildings. So it literally is a simplistic way of looking at what you do today. It's taking a look at your current configuration, your current tier structure, and simply pushing everything back 15 minutes. Because that's all you're doing, we've assumed that it's the same number of vehicles because we haven't changed anything. Now, one thing that may occur, and you folks know your community better than I do, but I've had an opportunity to experience your traffic. You do have some logistical issues in your community that as you move bell times around, there may be ramifications to the numbers of vehicles and runtime depending on when your vehicles are hitting the road. So whenever you get into it, even though it's a relatively simplistic change, eventually running trial routes is going to be important to see what the true impact is of modifying the bell times. The third option reverses tiers 1 and 2. So it takes your high school and it takes SAC 7 and 8 and puts it on a second tier. So instead of starting at 7:30, they would now start at 8:15. It takes SACs 5 and 6 in South and puts them at 7:30. We did add some additional buses to the program, 3, in order to try to modify some of the start time for the elementary kids going extremely early. Could you add more buses? Sure. But it's a way to recognize that if in fact you're flipping tiers like this, the first and second tier, you are going to be putting some of your younger students out fairly early. If in fact you went with this parameter, by adding 3 buses, your increase would be about $300,000 a year. The fourth option was similar to option 3, but we moved the start times back 15 minutes, and we compressed the time between tiers down to 40 minutes. Both of those resulted in an increase in the number of vehicles, and so we went to 39 vehicles from your current 33. That's an increased cost of about $600,000. Options 1, 3, and 4 require additional drivers. Drivers, as I mentioned, are difficult to find. They are a critical element of transportation. It's something that you need to be cognizant of, that if in fact you're going to require the contractor to have more resources, they need time to get the number of buses. Getting the number of buses is not really a big issue, but they also need the capability of personnel. As you know, your parking area right now is extremely congested for your numbers of buses. Extremely congested is being nice. You have no room for anything else there. If in fact you did any significant change in the number of vehicles, unless you found an alternative parking location, which to me has not been identified, it probably would require that the country day school buses that are now parked where the rest of the district vehicles are parked would need to be moved. And so the district would need to make arrangements, or the town would need to make arrangements to find alternative parking for the country day school vehicles. Just as a side light, but it does impact some of your bell times and some of the schedules. The egress from the high school is really difficult, as you people know. The amount of time that those vehicles try to leave the property are tied up at the light. That compresses the time that they can go out and spend time on the routes. If there was something the district could do to facilitate the egress from the property, we would strongly recommend that, because it's going to help get your vehicles on the road quicker. And during the course of the conversation, we've had an opportunity to share some of our thoughts with the district on some ideas that you may want to consider. I think it's important, and not being redundant, but in looking at cost, keep in mind that the cost estimates that we provided are based upon your current cost. That goes up every year. And keep in mind that the cost, the incremental cost that we mentioned, is not a one-time expense. That is an annual incremental cost. So for the program that we estimated would go up $297,000, that goes up $297,000 every year over what you're doing right now. And that spread will slightly increase each year because your cost of contracting goes up. We did not, in this study, in any way, address any of the issues relative to the pros and cons of a later bell time. That was not our charge, it was not our responsibility. You've had a study done, you're doing research, you had great comments tonight from the community. That was not part of this review. Part of this review was, could you accomplish a later start time? What might those start times be, and how would you accomplish it? Summarizing the various options, you've got 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then on the bottom of this chart is your current program, just to give you an easy reference as you review the materials. But it does provide you various scenarios that you could start to focus on as a district, that if you went through the deliberations and you got to a point and said, okay, let's throw out options 2 and 4, or let's eliminate options 1 and 2. That gives you the ability to start narrowing down what your likely alternatives are, so that you could focus on other ways to accomplish your goal. Again, there are an unlimited number of permutations here. And you can change that as you go through the process. I would like to take a second, though, and talk about timing. I've had the opportunity to work with districts, as I mentioned, a number of times. The biggest challenge that I find are districts who rush the process. In transportation, there are a number of things that need to be done. Routes need to be designed. Contractor needs to be provided input. Drivers need to be developed and trained. Trial runs need to be done. Routing needs to be done, which is extremely time-consuming. And that's all just in the area of transportation. It has nothing to do with facility schedules and athletics and funding and the litany of other issues that you're all challenged with. I guess from my standpoint, what I wanted to provide is a perspective to the district that the worst thing that I see with districts looking at bell times are those districts who make a mistake and rush it. That they make a decision at the last minute, they think they can just go ahead and make this change. From a transportation perspective, it can be extremely difficult. And so I put in comments in the presentation as simply guidance in our professional opinion that it's important to be very cautious as you go down the transportation road to give it time in order to properly implement. What I hate to see done are districts implementing time change and then all of a sudden in September realize it doesn't work, because it puts a negative attitude towards everything that you were trying to accomplish. and that would be terribly unfortunate. As you're looking at timelines, there are a number, from a transportation issue, a number of things that you need to do. You need to make final decisions, and you need to be able to get to a point that you choose an option, or instead of option 1 or 2, maybe you pick option 2B-1. It doesn't matter what it is, but you start getting to the point that you're fairly certain what direction you want to go in. At that point in time, your routing department, your transportation department of the district needs to develop actual routes. Unless you're simply switching tiers, so unless you're swapping tier 1 and 2, which doesn't dramatically change your routes, you need to reroute the school district, which means that there is a lot of work involved, a lot of software work involved, a lot of time involved that is not done in 2 weeks. And we typically recommend to districts that you need to provide your transportation department sufficient time, which is normally 3 or 4 months, because they need to integrate with any other work that they're doing. They need to look at trying to maximize efficiency. If you rush the process, typically what will happen is transportation is going to throw a whole bunch of buses at it. And you're going to be woefully inefficient. And at $100,000 a piece, that inefficiency can be very expensive. Once you develop your runs, you need to run trial runs, which means the buses go out on the routes at the actual time that they would normally operate so that you can replicate traffic. And they go out and test the runs that you developed on the software. Because no matter how good your transportation department is, and they're excellent, and no matter how good your software is, and it's a good system, I can guarantee you that trial runs will find problems. They're going to find areas that nobody thought about, or unusual traffic congestion in certain areas, and it gives you the ability to mitigate some of those problems by making routing changes. You're going to have a litany of meetings that are going to occur within the district, because now that you have definitive run times and definitive routes, you need to be sitting down with building administrators so you can talk about what time the bus is going to be there, and what minute is you're going to have to leave, and what your dismissal is going to have to look like. You're going to have meetings with parents, and you're going to have detailed conversations with your contractor. Again, you cannot assume that all of a sudden they're going to magically come up with 6 drivers, because they won't. And you've got to give them time. And in Connecticut, it takes time because of the licensing issues in Connecticut and training, and in order to get a sufficient number of people who recognize your community. Bottom line, from a transportation perspective, can a later start time happen? Yes. Can you achieve a goal of whatever your later start time is? Yes. Will there be a cost ramification? Depends on what start time you pick and what type of scenario you do. Once you make that determination, you then realize that your work has not been completed. Transportation needs to do routes. They need to do some homework, and you need to give them a sufficient amount of time to accomplish that. I'll be more than happy to answer the questions the board may have.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Sherry?
So just questions specific to your presentation.
Sherry's mic.
Sorry. Thank you for the thorough analysis. First question is, can you just share with us some of the pitfalls that you've learned from districts that have analyzed the bell times and moved to later start times and then had been unsuccessful with that? You mentioned that you've worked with districts, and
Yep.
just kind of cover what those pitfalls or learnings were.
Well, our responsibility here was to look from a transportation end, which we did. I know that you had your Hanover study done. That deals with a lot of the non-transportation types of issues. From a transportation standpoint, the biggest problems have been logistical issues with things like athletics. That as you take bell times and you move them later, that creates fewer numbers of vehicles to do after-school transportation, which exacerbates a problem because most contractors don't have a sufficient number of drivers or vehicles today. So it can create a problem when you're trying to utilize your transportation resources for after-school activities, whether it be sports or theatrics or whatever. The other biggest problem that we've typically seen has been a problem of finding drivers. And it may or may not impact here because of the three-tier system that you're on. But many districts who've looked at going to a later start time have run into problems that they found that the drivers that they've been utilizing who've been finishing their day at 8:30 or 9, all of a sudden now don't finish till 9:30 or 10 and they've got another job. Because a lot of drivers don't look at this as a full-time employment. So they will have some turnover in personnel because those drivers either have jobs after their AM runs or jobs in the afternoon that they immediately go to someplace else, and then they have to make a decision, do they stay in their school bus driver job with the district, or do they leave and go to another alternative? Without looking at your program and looking at options, it's hard to determine whether that would impact you. And then the biggest failure is rushing it. Rushing it, I can't overemphasize. Rushing transportation in order to accomplish a goal will probably result in a failure in the program.
Just two other quick questions. So if we choose an option, a later start time option, and which will require us rerouting, you rightfully pointed out that there is a cost to that. Do you have an estimate for what?
The rerouting itself shouldn't cost you anything, other than the trial runs. And you run trial runs anyway. The routing is time. I can't say it doesn't cost you anything. There's no out-of-pocket expenditure to do that because you're going to utilize existing staff members in order to do the routing and software that you already own. About the only incremental out-of-pocket cost would be the incremental trial runs that you may have to do in order to test the runs. And if you get to a point that you start running into problems, and this will be determined a lot depending on the significance of the change. The more significant the routing change, the more likely it is you're going to run additional trial runs, because once you run them, you're going to go back and make changes, and you're probably going to run them again to tweak it. And there's a cost associated with that because you've got to pay the contractor for the work.
Okay.
It's, in the scheme of things, as you're adding buses, it's nominal.
Okay. And then my final question is just on the specific options. So for option number 2, I'm curious why you looked at just shifting the whole schedule 15 minutes later. Like, why not 30 minutes later? Like, were you provided that guidance, or?
So
I'm just
taking the current tiers and just moving them later?
Yes.
As we went through looking at options, and that certainly is an option, we looked at that and said, look, let's pick a parameter that, based on our experience, might be viable, because moving it this late gets you a 3:50 dismissal. That means you're going to have kids getting home 4:30 or later, which is fairly late, especially depending on the time of the year and daylight saving time. So we arbitrarily said, as we looked at this, we think there's a point at which in the afternoon, too late is too late.
Mm-hmm.
But if the district wants to go later, you could simply take that structure and push the whole thing back 30 minutes because you're not changing anything from an operating structure standpoint.
Okay. And then why did you only look at compressing the 40 minutes between 2 years for option 4? Why didn't you look at that for the other options, for example, option 2?
All of that, again, is a tweak that you can do. If, in fact, you compress the bell times a little bit, which is what the 40 minutes does, it may or may not impact the number of vehicles. And we looked at the other options that we put together and said, this is a reasonable program for a structure. If, in fact, you want to compress bell times, you can, with the understanding that, as we showed in other areas, it may impact the numbers of vehicles. As we looked at compressing the bell times, it did add numbers of vehicles. We think you're going to get approximately that number of vehicles, which in this case was 6, if you tried to compress bell times. My guess is you're looking at 4 to 6. One issue I did mention, though, was taking a look at your high school egress. If you could positively impact the dismissal of vehicles from the high school, that may help you, and it may mitigate some of the need for increasing number of vehicles. So you really ought to do it in conjunction with it.
Penny? Penny?
So in terms of the high school problem with the egress,
Yeah.
how many minutes does that add to the afternoon routes? Like if we were able to do some structural, add some other, I don't know what it would be.
Traffic varies here. I didn't watch it every day. It's a kind of thing that somebody ought to observe for a number of days to try to get an average. My guess is you could be looking at 3 to 5 minutes, that it might help you, if in fact you could do something about traffic flow. Again, I didn't stand there and analyze it. I did not do a traffic study, which the district certainly could do, and at some point you probably should.
So just in terms of the high school then, is the problem getting the buses through the two intersections with the roads, or getting the buses out of the high school?
No, it's getting out of the high school property onto the roads, but you've also got this congestion of cars and buses all at the same time, which is fascinating.
Those intersections get scheduled at an F, and they get studied by traffic consultants.
Well, there's a number of districts that, and I don't like having my back to the public because if I say things, then they get upset, but there are a number of districts that I've dealt with that have restricted auto traffic at the point that buses are released. So they literally will stop cars on the property and say, you can't leave until all the buses have been discharged. Doesn't go over real well. But it is a way from a logistical standpoint to allow your vehicles to leave the property.
Okay, thank you.
Deanna?
So was that the only suggestion you gave to the administration about how to mitigate egress at the high school?
We talked about schedule. Again, I didn't do a traffic study. You've got to look at controlling traffic. Can personnel modify it? Can you control the numbers of cars? Can you adjust traffic signals? Which traffic signals can you adjust? That was not part of what we did.
Okay. And then,
should you? Yes.
Okay. So I guess that's a conversation with the town. The other question I have is on option 3, when you added buses for South because of the walkers, is that assume every child is able to be bused with this? Or
We did not change your parameters of ridership at all.
There's more. I thought at South you added the smaller buses, the 77. The 77 passenger. Did I look at that incorrectly? South. Yeah, you went from 9 on option 2, 77 passenger buses, to 12 on option 3. So we have more in option 3 than we did on option 2.
It adds 3 buses.
It adds 3 buses. 3 big buses. Is that because there's walkers and it's too early, so we need more buses because as a guiding principle, we didn't want kids walking
Right.
in the dark. I just wanted
Yes.
to make sure that that's every child, or is that?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand.
Clear what you're asking. Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Jen?
So can I ask a quick question? What is our policy now on South School? Where's the cutoff? Like, how many walkers? I mean, not necessarily how many walkers do we have, but where do we actually bus kids in the South area? Where does that start? Do you know?
I have to look at there's a policy that talks about distance from the school, and it has to do with
because
maybe
if we
it's a
do
half
that
mile
flip
to a mile.
option,
It gets longer as the students are
Right.
older, as they move up. So the
Right.
5th and 6th or 7th and 8th might walk further, where some of them are busted at South.
and that just makes it like you've got little people walking in the dark with that one option, I think.
But just on that, so under the ridership information, it says at South that there's an enrollment of 495 and 472 riders. So that would indicate that there's very few students walking. I'm
And
just
the current program summary?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to clarify the source here. So we have enrollment and then we have number of riders.
Right. Well, you have the assigned riders, which are those individuals who transportation assigns to a vehicle. Doesn't mean they all ride, but you have assumed that they were going to ride and you provided them the opportunity for service.
So have we?
Yes.
So have we done the follow-up analysis? I mean, so they're opting in and assigned a bus, but do we know exactly who's riding on the buses? And
Well,
have we-
Those are the percentages to the right,
Yeah,
correct?
well, excuse me. If you look a couple slides earlier, this one is called ridership percentage of schedule. There's a chart
I
that
got it.
shows by
Okay.
school, the percentage of students who are riding, who are as a percentage of the scheduled riders. So it's understandable. Your high school is a much lower utilization than your elementary is, which is typical.
So,
Jen?
so maybe this is a question for Brian, but I know that we did a ridership study, correct? Did that happen? And then, and from what I remember hearing was that from that, it seemed like quite a high percentage of the people that opted in to ride were riding. Is that?
Yeah, our transportation department does ridership surveys just as a matter of best practice. So Roy and his team, they do it regularly. I think that helped Mark in
Is that what
doing
he
the
based?
research. We also did another one in the spring because we wanted to make sure that we captured it prior to the end of the school year so Mark could begin his work and do a lot of it over the summer. I think a couple of things came out of that. I don't want to speak for you, but I think about some feedback about our current program and the efficiency of our current program. And then our policy at the at the high school level, where we actually 11th and 12th grade don't opt out, they actually opt in to tell us if they need to use a bus. So we don't default to routing them. We actually default to not routing them, and then they select,
Right.
choose to come in, which I think does increase the ridership and improve the efficiency of the routing.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The problem with transportation is you will never get to 100% utilization on the vehicles. And part of it's a time-space issue, that you've got a limited amount of time. Obviously, you have space on your vehicles, but during that time period, how far does that vehicle go and what does it have to pick up? Well, if you have a house and then Johnny in a house and Johnny decides not to ride, you're still going to pick up here and here. You're still going to go down the same road. It's still going to take the same amount of time, but you're going to have one less person on the vehicle. Doesn't really change from an operating standpoint how many vehicles you're going to run, and probably doesn't materially change the length of the run. And so it becomes a problem from an efficiency standpoint that even though you have ridership in the 60% range for elementary and middle school, that's fairly normal in the industry. Your high school utilization, honestly, at 43% in the morning is higher than sometimes what we see. But part of that is because you're doing the opt-in instead of the opt-out.
Right. Can I say one more thing?
Maria?
Sorry.
I think a lot of people have their kids assigned to buses, but do end up driving them in. Is there a way to figure that out more regularly? How many people are actually assigned to a bus but don't actually use it? So now it looks like 43% are assigned to a bus, but in actuality, how many kids are actually getting driven in?
That's percent of scheduled, so
Do you wanna click?
43%
Yeah,
are
that's a-
scheduled.
that's-
No, 43% of those scheduled are riding. So this is percent of scheduled.
It's 43%
So this
of
shows
those that
they-
are scheduled are
they
riding.
surveyed that.
Right.
So they do audits.
Oh, okay.
Right, we
So
say
43%,
this
but
many
you're
are
saying,
routed, that many are on the bus, and we do it over in snapshots, so maybe a week at a time, and at different times of the year, because it will vary different times of the year as well, so I think there's,
And
Roy's
part of the
department does it
problem
pretty well.
is if that student or that parent decides that on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday this week, we're going to drive the student in, but next week, Thursday's not convenient for me, and the student's going to ride from a transportation end, we have to assume that student's going to ride every day because we have no alternative.
Yep.
Unless there's a definitive 5-day-a-week schedule that they're not going to ride, you have to plan for it.
Jen?
In some of these options, I see that you have like different times in between, like an 8:15 start for option one, and then a 9:10 start. It's like a 55-minute, in between the two start times. I'm not sure about the terminology, but if we did this traffic restrict that you just talked about, the bus.
Did the what?
Like the buses, what did you call that?
A traffic study?
well,
No,
restricting.
Like if you
The egress.
restricted.
The
Egress.
Yeah,
Oh,
if
the
you
egress.
restricted
Yeah,
other
open high
drivers to
school.
let the buses pass, would that make, tell us about if we did something like that.
It's not going to turn everything upside down.
Right.
Could it help? Yes. Could you maybe pick up 2, 3, 4, maybe upwards of 5 minutes with the high school dismissal? Possibly. Does that allow you to maybe compress the time in the afternoon and move it up 5 minutes from what might be in our projections? Possibly. Those are the kinds of permutations and tweaks that, as a board, you ought to go through. My suggestion is you should go through those kinds of conversations, and as you zero in on what you believe the best format might be, you start providing guidance to your transportation people that this is really what we'd like to achieve. Is there a way, instead of the option that TAS came up with, could we take the afternoon dismissal that TAS came up with, and could we buy ourselves 5 minutes? And how would we do that? And it might be a combination of traffic, it might be a combination of numbers of buses. It may be that as part of that process, you set up a parameter and say, we're willing to make changes, but you cannot exceed dollar amount of this. So yes, we want to achieve our goal, but we're not going to add 3 more buses because we're not going to spend $300,000.
Right. I just would love to add too, I mean, speaking about all the traffic and experiencing it every single day, especially in these Saks, South, High School, YMCA, Merritt, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I stand there and I try to let the buses out, but then I'm like, I have to go. I mean, these buses can't get out, you know, after they drop the kids off at the high school, they can't get out because there's so much traffic. So I just feel like.
And you're the
we need
one
to-
I observed blocking all those buses.
I'm like, sorry. No, I know, it's so bad.
Katrina?
Question on the ridership, going back to ridership for just a moment. Do you have measurable data or data on comparable districts? Like how much would we potentially expect ridership to change, increase? I mean,
There's nothing, that's an excellent question. We get that kind of question all the time. Every district's demographics is so different. Economic demographics, how many kids have cars, how many parents are working, not working, how many can transport. So ridership, for all the years we've done studies, comparing ridership is something we've learned we'll never do because there's no way to forecast it.
Yeah.
You are significantly different than Stanford. And so if I took any numbers from Stanford and tried to overlay them here, they make no sense.
Right.
In looking at history of making changes, I would typically recommend to a district that you would not set up a format with the assumption that your ridership will either increase or decrease. You wouldn't create a foundation for a change based upon an assumption of ridership because it may not occur. Now, that's not to say that if in fact you did your best projections and you determined an option and you implemented it, that during the first year you shouldn't do a lot of ridership surveys and detailed analysis, because you should. And you may find that at the end of the first year, what you thought was a good projection is flawed. And maybe the variable, or one of the key variables, was ridership. And you might be able to decrease a bus or two the following year because your ridership has changed. That's great. That's $100,000 every one you can drop. Conversely, if you change bell times, and as a result of that, you have more students riding because they find that the start time of school makes it more palatable to get on the bus than it does today, the projections and the number of vehicles may be wrong, and you may get to a point that during the first year, you may need to increase the number of vehicles just to give you capacity. I would love to tell you this is an exact science, but it isn't. It's order of magnitude. You do have a good contract, though, that gives you the ability to add and delete. So you can add and delete vehicles. What the industry is called add and delete.
Maria?
We heard from one of the parents that their school, their home state, they actually trim time off of the classes. Have you worked with schools that have done that to kind of eke some more time out that you can put in the front of the day?
Our projections were based on maintaining the length of the school day.
Or have you had experience with other districts doing that?
I've worked with districts who have changed their length of day. I've worked with districts who've increased their length of day, and as a result of that, restricted what they could do for bell times. I've have districts I've just worked with that significantly increase the length of day and decrease the number of days. but it restricts what we can do for bell times because of afternoon dismissals. So every district, I'm not being evasive, every district is so different, and the demographics are so different. We did not get into the educational component. That's not our area of expertise, and so we didn't touch it. We just assumed your length of day at every building stays the same.
Sherry?
So I just want to go back to your pitfall about if you move to the later start times, it can create logistics challenges with the after-school activities. Do we have the specific information for this district in terms of, is it the same buses that are used for the after-school activities? So would we have that conflict here?
I believe they are. I think the...
Yeah, I mean, you've got
the buses
you've got
for the late
X number of buses and X number of drivers.
Yeah.
So there are going to be vehicles that once they finish their PM runs are going to take trips. If in fact you significantly lengthen the day for normal PM dismissals, it may create a scheduling conflict. That may be something you can deal with your contractor about. The problem you get to, though, is they can't, it's difficult for them to go out and simply hire a driver to do trips in the afternoon because you can't find the people. So they'll try to utilize driver and provide them time. Did I look at which vehicles do other things? No. You do have late runs now. You have vehicles running late runs. And, you know, I would assume your late runs would get pushed back the same length of time as your day. But that's a decision that as a district you'd have to make.
And what's considered a significant shift back? 15 minutes, 30 minutes? I mean, I'm just...
I don't know how to answer that.
But I'm trying to, you're giving me a general answer, and I'm trying to understand if we
'cause
have that, if we have that issue that we need to.
If you pushed all of your bell times back a half hour, I would think that there would be some ramification to some of your afternoon trips. To what degree, I don't know. That's something that as a board, you would need to talk to your transportation department and talk to the contractor and say, if we did this, what would be the impact? And how many days a week would this impact us? And for what reasons are we using the buses? And how would it impact us? So that's not a question that I asked.
Okay, and just one other quick question. So for option 3, I'm just curious why you flipped the SACS 5-6 South to the earliest time versus the elementary.
Let me get to that chart so I know which one you're talking about.
So, what's for both option 3 and 4? So that's where you reverse current tiers 1 and 2, but
yes.
I'm just curious why you reversed the SACS 5-6 and South versus the elementary tier, because I mean our 5th and 6th graders, they're just, I mean, they're
could you look at
adolescent teens as well. So
could you look at putting East and West first? Your youngest, you probably could. On the options, we chose not to, but it's a format question.
Thank you.
Taylor?
This may not be a question for you, it may be for the administration, but so do we have a sense for what percentage of our buses are used for after-school athletics? And if there's a differential in when we have to get a bus from an outside provider for an athletic event, do we pay a premium for those buses and riders? And this may be for later. And I would love to get a sense for what that premium would be and what sort of, so you know, depending on what we, you know, decide to do or not, that also needs to be taken into account when we look at sort of the overall financial impact of a start time change.
I can't answer all of it, but I will say the current program summary, there's a page that shows the 3 tiers and the buses that are used for each of those tiers. It's part of the current program summary piece, but that's all right, I'll just briefly say. It shows that in the 3rd tier, there are 4 buses, and here it says available as spares. I did talk to Roy about those, and he said, well, really, that's our late bus, and those are our buses that are taking students to other events. So that's exactly what we're talking about. Right. When we have to bring in other buses, there is something in the contract around the charge for that bus and the driver and what that takes. There is an upcharge for that. And I think those are the 4 buses we're talking about, that if they're put later in the afternoon where they're not available to bring students to other schools for contests, that we'd have to figure out a way to somehow replace, however that works out. And we do, again, we have it in the contract, and we can take a look exactly what those costs are. I do know that there are times we get into trouble with that. So it's in the contract, and I think they would be essentially sending from another town over to do that run for us, but it's not always available. And so sometimes you hear the stories about, you know, we're waiting there, our bus never showed up, or we were there and our bus was half an hour late, whatever those things are. Those stories generally come from whatever issue happened with that bus in the town that it was being sent from to come and to cover the run for us. So we can get more data and less anecdotal, but that's just my understanding of it at this point.
Any other questions? Tom?
I just have one question, and I sort of wanted to summarize some of the comments you made, and you let me know if they're accurate. Average ride time, do you have a feel for average ride time in the afternoon?
It was on one of these charts. PM ride times, based on the building, it was 35 minutes for the Tier 1, 27 for Tier 2, 26 for Tier 3.
So improving the mitigating egress from Canaan High School would, you know, obviously significantly improve ride time. And it would also possibly add 5 minutes more to any possible proposed pushback. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Again, I'm ballparking this 5 minutes.
Ballpark with that 5 minutes, yes.
Yeah, don't hold me to that, because I don't know what you could achieve.
Right.
But is it reasonable to think that it would help you? Yes.
That's all, thanks.
Okay. Penny?
So has the district ever done a hybrid approach? A number of, like St. Luke's just went to a later start 2 days a week. So if you did an option 3, could you have, and the administration will hate this, but it's either share the pain, share the gain solution, where you did, said 3 days a week with the high school starting at 7:30 and 2 days with it starting at 8:15, and then flipped the other tier? Is that's
that
way,
would qualify as a permutation.
we should just discard that as way too complicated.
No, did we look at that as an option? No. I guess my initial reaction is that the key is we'd have to look at ingress and egress at each of the buildings, and would it impact on a variable basis 3 days versus 2 days? And if it did, might you have to slightly increase the spread in the bell times to handle those off days? And you might, because there will be a slight differential. There might be a slight differential by moving those tiers around. I wouldn't know that unless you looked at it. Again, that's a permutation, it's a tweak. Could you look at it? You could. I'm not sure that I've done a district who's done that.
Any other questions? Just got one or two. So first, it's really for you, Brian, which is what do high school students do if they have their first period free? Do they, hop on the later bus? And then how much do we actually measure that? Is that something that's relatively flexible for them?
So the high school schedule right now is a rotating drop schedule. There's a morning rotation and an afternoon rotation. So we heard one or two of the parents talk about their free period in the morning, and the golden free, which is when you have 2 in a row. That's new for me. But generally, no, the students don't have another way to come in. So either if they have a ride, if they drive, a brother or sister or what have you, then they could come in later. Otherwise, they would still have to take the bus the way that it is.
Okay.
But it is a scheduling thing. And, Ms. Birdsall before mentioned, is there a scheduling solution or a scheduling piece that can be a part of this? That is something else that we've been looking at, and we're continuing to research that a little bit too.
Right, okay. And have we had any conversations yet with the town just around traffic generally? And the impact that any of this might have, either positive or negative on traffic?
Well, in the last 48 hours, we've had a lot of conversations about paving.
Yeah.
But about traffic in general, I know we had some studies done around Saks a little bit. but not specific to exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
You know, as Mark said, it's kind of, there are a couple of phases to it. One is just getting out of the lot. The other is, you know, the sort of the location of our schools, right? Where on this side of town, they have to all sort of, most of them head up and then have to come all back down. So that's a conversation that we can open up and start having with them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I just think it's part of the, you know, the overall study that we need to do, because it could, again, it could be just like the egress issue at the high school, it could actually be a positive, depending upon where the buses are going and when. Okay, any other, Penny?
So I guess I'd like to know what our plan is going to be to get input from sort of the other stakeholders in some of these options. For example, option number 2 is nice in that it doesn't have any increased cost. It moves everything back 15 minutes, but it does put the elementary schools and elementary teachers out at 3:50 instead of 3:35. And I know that commuting is a real issue. So I don't know, there was some discussion at our roundtable about what the last period time should be that we should allow schools to get out. And I don't really know whether, based upon that, option 2 is viable for our district. So I don't know what our process is going to be to get input on these options from other stakeholders.
Sure, yeah.
So now that there are some options to consider, I think, as Mark is saying, there are thousands of permutations of this, and, you know, people will be kind of thinking it through, but it's so helpful to have an understanding of all of what goes into it. You know, the fact that the 3-tier system that we have, as you mentioned earlier, there are some schools that have 1 tier, and they can just shift that time. You know, there's one group of buses that all show up at the same time, and this is much more complex than that. I do think that having some options to at least start to consider and to weigh and to think about will give people some things to think about, and I would suggest, and I know the board's talked about it a bit, providing at least 1, if not 2 more opportunities for the public to come and to share and to discuss and to provide feedback on what the options are here. There's, you know, the parameters to begin working within. Of course, now seeing the costs in those pieces as a part of it. I think that I will be bringing this to folks internally. I'll be looking at it with our athletics department, with our visual performing arts department, with the principals, with teachers, with others, to sort of talk it through a little bit and to receive some feedback from them and some thoughts and suggestions. There's no pride of authorship. Mark, you've told me that before as this was put together, that it's all understanding everything is fluid and growing, and this is the approach that we've used. Nobody comes to this saying, this is what I want, and now I have to go through this process in order to get there. You know, we're working to generate the best solution for our students as we do it. Somebody used the term, you know, finding the right path, and I think that's what we're all working to do, is finding the right path for the district, whatever that may be. So internally, I think the feedback, I'll be collecting feedback and talking with folks and putting some structures in place just to do that work. I would recommend the board, and I know that you're in favor of this, because you know, I think that, well, I know throughout this process, the board's been open to feedback from folks, and certainly people have not been shy about providing it at different times, which is helpful. So I think another opportunity or 2 for people to digest this and come out and talk a little bit and share some other thoughts with the board. Tonight, I think, is also very important, because it signals to folks that the board is continuing to look at this and trying to make the best possible decision. And it is a difficult decision to make. Again, if we're on 1 tier, it's an awful lot easier. You pick the time, bring them in, and you're good. But every decision you make in one end sort of cascades throughout the system, so it's understanding that and what have you. So I think
I think it's
like
personally, I think it's really important that we understand, you know, traffic, and we understand the impact it's going to have on, you know, all of our teachers and other staff. You know, we don't want to create a situation where we're making a great change, you know, as we've heard all the, you know, benefits from a start time perspective, but we're creating other major problems, either for the town or for staff, and causing turnover. Sure.
So I just want to say that, first of all, I think it's very important that we had this public hearing tonight, and I hope all of the parents know that, you know, we are listening and that we heard all of their comments. I hope in turn they know that we are all here because we care so deeply for the district, and that we are working very hard to make the right decisions, the best decisions for the district. I know that all of the parents who are so engaged are engaged because they care as well. With that being said, moving forward, I mean, should we or can we form a working committee with some parent representation? I mean, I know part of the frustration that we heard from some of the parents was that fishbowl approach doesn't allow the bilateral communication that they're seeking. So I'm just wondering, in terms of moving this forward, you know, if we should be talking about how we engage all stakeholders in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. It just has to be done in such a way where, you know, you can actually accomplish something. So, you know, I think the tough thing when you set up a body like that is to have the right representation, and, you know, allow people to come in and really contribute, while not making it a complete free-for-all, you know, with too many people in the room. So I don't know. I think something like that would make sense. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the you know, there are lots of sort of variables getting us to this point, right? And the having an opportunity to understand all of sort of the variables that have to be considered in order to make the decision. I do think that Mark mentioned the transportation study. I know a few folks have talked about that. I know Mark has some ideas around that. Having some more information to bring forward to people to consider in the discussion is important too. There are lots of people who have done quite a bit of research in town who will say this, you know, who believe, and I understand why, this is the single most important thing, and that cost is not a factor. And there's other folks that say this is a very important thing, and cost is a factor, and it's kind of balancing all of that out. Ultimately, you know, it will be the board making a decision around sort of direction and future, and, you know, what's the best thing that we can do. But having a group together to talk and to surface other things can certainly work.
I think the point that you made, I think, is really important, which is that when people sit down, they're educated about the various options, the costs and benefits of each of them. You know, not just from a financial standpoint, obviously, but all of the things that it will impact. So I think the process that we're following makes a lot of sense. You know, I don't think it would be great to have people sit down right in the middle of everything without all the, you know, good information that that we've been gathering. So I don't know exactly when the right time is for that, but I think that's how we should think about it.
Can I just add also? Totally agree with what Sherry said, by the way, because we hear you and we're listening. A lot of us have kids in the schools. We see it. We know. And I also I know you said you'd be gathering the information from other stakeholders like the administration and athletics and teachers, but I would love to hear, I mean, I would love to see maybe a meeting at some point. I know we have budget coming up, and that's a big part of it as well, but I would love to hear what they have to say. I know we had that open forum, you know, during the day, but I know a lot of people weren't able to be there, and I don't know, just would love to hear a little bit of feedback from them, because we can't make an informed decision until we kind of hear from everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep, that would definitely be the goal,
Right.
to try to get as much feedback for the board
Right.
as possible to consider everything prior to kind of
Yeah, and not
picking a
rushing,
path.
clearly, because we don't want to rush, because that, you know, as you said, that leads to things not working. But we also need some type of, I mean, again, hearing tonight parents thinking that we're not moving on this, and, you know, just to make sure that we are moving and that we are, we have, like, you know, an end in sight or a schedule of some sort would be great.
Any other questions? Sherry?
So I would also just want to request that, I mean, this was such a thorough analysis of transportation, which is one component of the decision, but I feel like we need a similar analysis on like schedule options, because we've kind of heard various different things proposed, whether it be, I mean, shortening the school day and adding days to the school calendar year, or freezing the first period. I mean, we've heard a couple different options kind of thrown out, and it would be helpful to have actually an analysis with what those different options are and what the pros and cons of those different options are.
And that work is being done now, right? And they're looking at the master scheduling options, another possibility. And so when that's ready, it certainly will be brought forward to share. It just isn't, you know, it just takes some time to model. The transportation piece, you know, if you can't get the kids there, it doesn't work, right? So we figured the work that Mark is doing here and really taking a good look at this is foundational to decision-making going forward. And then maybe there is some kind of a hybrid solution. You know, maybe it is a 15 minutes here and a scheduling change and some other things. So we're sort of working up all different kind of scenarios around that. It's challenging, as Mark mentioned also, you know, you're operating a school district, you've got your schedulers and others doing lots of other things, and they're sort of layering that on top. So they're working through and doing the best they can. As soon as that's ready, it certainly will come forward as another piece to the puzzle as we put it together.
Maria?
I just want to say I agree, and I know the transportation study didn't take into account any variance in the day, but looking at a hybrid maybe solution where it's different for high school versus, you know, the other grades, I think that would be a great idea. I'd like to see that, you know, what it would look like.
We get into some challenges if the length of the day is different at a different level because of our, you know, our contracts and, you know, salaries and things like that, and hours worked. So we'd have to consider all of that, but it'll be a conversation we have going forward. Sure.
Just one other question. In terms of the actual timing of the school day, is that something that's part of our contracts with any of our unions, or is it not?
The number of days?
The number of days and the start times and?
Nope.
No, the start times aren't.
It's a Board of Education management right to set the start and end times of the school day.
I got it. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Next item is statement of accounts with Dr. Keating.
Thank you.
And I should tell everyone, this is usually where the room empties. It's never taken personally. Yeah,
We're still here.
All right. So you have before you October 31st, 2018 Statement of Accounts. We're 4 months into the fiscal year, and we have spent 25.5% of our budget, encumbered 65.2%, and we have a funding balance of 9.3%. Consistent with previous months, 73% of the encumbrances relate to salaries. I'd like to point out that we do have some transfers within the objects themselves, but we won't have our official transfer till we do the reforecast, which follows our budget for 2020. And one final note I would like to point out is that we do have, continue to have a shortfall in tuition out of district, as we've mentioned in previous reports. And we do have access to the excess cost grant if we can't cover it within our budget. So you should be aware of that. But we do expect this number to potentially grow beyond the current deficit of 357. So we're going to keep a close eye on that. Darlene watches it regularly, and we'll update the board accordingly as we move through the year. Any questions?
None? Thank you. Next are our action items. The first is a movement to approve as a second read the BOE Administration Policy Series 2000 as first moved and seconded by Ms. Hobbs and Ms. Ration, respectively, on November 5th, 2018. Any discussion? Anything, Tom? Okay.
I'll just make the single note that no changes have been made since the first read.
Great. Could I have a motion? Oh, just a vote? Okay, great. All those in favor? Thank you. And then the next is a PTC donation to Saks. The donation is from the Saks PTC in the amount of $6,862.76 for 2 lighted display cases for student artwork. Deanna?
I'll move to approve the donation.
Thank you, Hazel. All those in favor?
Can we just know, I'm just having affinity with Saks, where the cases are going to go? I'm just curious.
Oh, and I told them they didn't have to come.
I know, but if you know where they are, it could be in Friday notes.
I would be glad to put it there.
I'd be curious where they want to put them.
I know Alan has been very, very involved with it, and I'll be glad. I'll get the exact details and I'll put it in.
I know
in my
it'll be
notes
an
on Friday.
excellent, it'll be an excellent addition. I'm
Right.
just curious about it.
Absolutely.
Any comments from the public? Nope. Okay. Announcements and future business.
Excellent. So first, of course, let me start by saying Happy Thanksgiving. You know, it's a shortened week this week, and on Thursday we have Thanksgiving, and that also means the Turkey Bowl over at the stadium in Stamford. We've been selling our tickets. I think the place will be packed and should be a very good game, if not very cold. It's supposed to be very cold that morning, like in the teens. I will say that the 90-minute delay on Friday was very much needed after the full day on Thursday. The roads were rough for people driving home, and so the 90-minute delay, or 2-hour delay on Friday, I think was appropriate and worked out well. Now our next meeting is December 3rd. We'll have an update from our Crisis Advisory Board. As you'll recall, the board invested in training for Alice back in the summer, which is really it's an updated approach. What we used to call lockdowns, now the practice is quite a bit different. Lockdown, even in and of itself, is a bit of a misnomer. You know, now what we're really looking at, best practice is teaching students and staff and others to be responsive in the moment, not just to sort of be formulaic in what they do, but to be decision makers in crisis and times of emergency. So Joanne Rocco and members of the Crisis Advisory Board are going to be sharing that information with us a little bit, and some of the best practice recommendations from this training that will be phasing into our school district at each level. You know, it looks a little bit different at elementary than it does at middle than it does at the high school. Of course, let me say congratulations to new Board of Education Chair, Mr. Hayes. Vice Chair and Secretary. And I think somebody wants to say something.
Sherry?
Well, I just wanted to open the floor for a moment of gratitude and appreciation for our outgoing chair, Deanna Carlson. We have a couple gifts that we're going to give you on behalf of the board, but you have given so much of yourself to this board over the past 3 years. I mean, this has been a full-time job for you, and you've made us a stronger board. I mean, your diligence and like your financial acumen and your leadership, and also the collaboration and the relationship building that you've brought to the town bodies has been significant, and has been significant for the district and for the students that you've served. And like your commitment is just amazing. It's just unequaled. And I hope that the parents and the students and the teachers and the staff and everyone know how much you've given of yourself on their behalf. No, I think
Thank you,
absolutely.
So, I just wanted to tell Brendan, having been a prior member of the Agenda Planning Board, that we did not put off the school start time discussion until your first meeting in That this was the earliest opportunity to present. And I spoke about Deanna earlier, but in your dedication doing this for 3 straight years, I have known many chairs who after 1 year said, please, thank you, I love doing it, but I'm ready to move on. And you have been an amazing leader for the Board of Education and for the students in this district, and thank you for your great service. We've all benefited from it.
Deanna, this is on behalf of the whole board. This was actually made from some SAC students. It says, thank you, Madam Chair. And then there's a card here signed in by some of the SAC students. And this is from everyone on the board.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you guys very much. Well, it was definitely my honor and privilege, and I said that the other day. I mean, you know, this is an amazing board of people, and that's why you do it. I mean, we have a great board, great administration, and, you know, it makes, you know, it's not always easy, but it's always a pleasure working with everybody, and everybody's in it for the same reason. We all are. So nobody goes through this without wanting to do what's best for kids and families, and so thank you guys for making my 3 years as chair.
So, Deanna, I think you have to look at the new nameplate, motivational plate that we got you.
Oh, thank
Now
you,
that you're
guys.
not chair.
It's changing the world. I love it. Thank you.
So fun. Oh my gosh, and then should I open this here? Oh my goodness.
Some red and black stamps.
Oh, I love that. Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you guys very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't go anywhere. I need your help.
Anytime. I always say.
All right. We have a motion to adjourn. Penny, second. Katrina, sorry. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.